What a narcissist fears most after hurting someone who truly loved them. And I want to begin with the specific combination of elements in this title, because each one is doing important work and the combination is more specific than it might initially appear. Hurting someone who truly loved them. These two elements together are not describing every instance of narcissistic harm. They are describing a specific category of it. The harm that occurs not in the context of a supply relationship, where the love was primarily the performance of love in service of supply extraction, but in the context of a relationship where something genuinely felt by another person was genuinely present, where the love on one side was real in the full, unambiguous, specifically personal sense of the word, not the performance of love that the love bombing was designed to elicit, not the attachment that the intermittent reinforcement produced, not the complicated, compromised, partly trauma-bonded orientation that long exposure to a narcissistic dynamic tends to create. Real love, the specific, clear, seeing and choosing, anyway love that some people bring to relationships with narcissists despite everything, and that the narcissist at some level knows they received and did not deserve and did not protect and ultimately harmed. That knowledge, the narcissist's knowledge that real love was present and that they hurt it, is the foundation of what this episode is about, and what it produces in the narcissist's psychology. What the narcissist fears in the aftermath of that specific harm is something that requires the most careful psychological precision to describe accurately, because it is so consistently misrepresented by both the narratives that are most comforting and the narratives that are most cynical. The comfortable narrative says the narcissist fears nothing, feels nothing, is not capable of the kind of interior experience that fear in this context would require. The cynical narrative says the narcissist fears only the practical consequences, the social fallout, the supply disruption, the logistical difficulties of the aftermath. Both of these narratives are wrong, and the truth that sits between them in the specific interior experience of a narcissist who has hurt someone who truly loved them and who has enough access to that experience to register what it is the subject of this entire episode. So stay with me. Let's start by establishing what fear means in the narcissist's psychological architecture, because fear in the narcissist does not always present in the ways that make it immediately recognizable as fear. The narcissist's relationship with fear is one of the most specifically managed aspects of their entire psychological structure, because fear, genuine, unmanaged, undefended fear, is one of the experiences that the construction was most fundamentally built to prevent. Not because the narcissist is braver than most people. The opposite, because the wound that made the construction necessary was itself a fear experience, the foundational, formative experience of the actual self being insufficient or unsafe or unworthy of the love and protection it needed. And the construction was built specifically to ensure that that fear experience, or anything that resembled it, would not be accessible to conscious experience again. The construction converts fear into other things, into anger, which is more comfortable and more actionable and more consistent with the self-image the construction maintains, into contempt, which elevates the self above the threatening situation by devaluing the situation's power to threaten, into the performance of indifference, which removes the threatening situation from the narcissist's apparent concern before it can be acknowledged as something concerning. These conversions are so efficient and so automatic that most narcissists genuinely do not experience the underlying fear as fear. They experience the converted form, the anger or the contempt or the indifference, and the fear remains below the surface, below the conversion, operating at the level of the actual self rather than at the level of the construction's conscious experience. And this means that what the narcissist fears most after hurting someone who truly loved them will not usually appear as fear. It will appear as something else, as increased supply-seeking urgency, as unusual social visibility, as the specific, overperformed quality of someone who is more aggressively fine than the circumstances would require a genuinely fine person to be. The fear is there. It is simply wearing the construction's clothing. And once you know what to look for underneath the clothing, it is as readable as anything else in the narcissist's psychology. What the narcissist fears most in the aftermath of hurting someone who truly loved them is not what most people expect. It is not the social consequences, though those produce their own category of threat response that the narcissist system manages with well-practiced efficiency. It is not the supply disruption, though the loss of a genuine supply source triggers the forward motion and replacement seeking that the supply economics require. It is not even the guilt in the sense of moral distress about the harm caused, because the construction's conversion mechanisms prevent most of that from being experienced as guilt in the full, conscious sense. What the narcissist fears most is something considerably more interior, and considerably more specifically threatening to the construction than any of those external concerns. What the narcissist fears most is the specific knowledge that the person who truly loved them has, the knowledge that the real love was real, and that the narcissist received it and failed it and harmed it, and that the person who offered it, who saw the actual self underneath the construction, who extended the caring toward what was actually there, who stayed through cycles of behavior that should have made staying impossible. That person now possesses an account of the narcissist that is both completely accurate and completely unflattering, and the accuracy is the specific threat. Because the narcissist's construction depends, as we have established in previous episodes in this space, on narrative control, on the ability to maintain a version of events that positions the construction favorably in the account of any significant relationship or its ending. And the person who truly loved them is the specific person who is least available for the narrative control that the construction requires. Because the person who truly loved them saw too much, was present in too many of the moments when the construction stepped back and what was actually there became visible, had too many conversations in which the actual self made contact with the relationship in ways that the construction's retrospective revision cannot successfully redact, knows too specifically, too accurately, too completely for the devaluation process to reduce the knowledge to something manageable. This is what the narcissist fears, not the person. The knowledge the person carries. The specific, accurate, loving, and therefore all the more devastating knowledge of exactly who the narcissist is underneath everything they present themselves as being. Now let's get specific about the forms the fear takes, because specificity is what makes this understanding practically useful, rather than simply intellectually interesting. The first form the fear takes is what I would describe as the monitoring compulsion. In the aftermath of hurting someone who truly loved them, the narcissist system develops a specific, often obsessive quality of attention directed at the former supply source that is qualitatively different from the ordinary post-relationship monitoring we have discussed in other contexts. The ordinary monitoring is supply economics driven. It is the background tracking of a former supply source's availability for potential re-engagement. The monitoring compulsion that the fear produces is different. It is not organized around supply availability. It is organized around threat assessment. The narcissist is monitoring not for evidence that you are available, but for evidence of what you know, what you are saying, who you are saying it to, what account of the relationship you are offering to the people who are available to receive it, whether the knowledge you carry is being deployed in ways that are reaching the social world the narcissist inhabits and influencing how that world understands the narcissist's account of what happened. This monitoring has a specific urgency that the supply economics monitoring does not have, an urgency that reflects the specific quality of the threat the fear is organized around. Because the knowledge you carry is not just personally threatening to the narcissist's self-image. It is socially threatening. It is capable of producing the one outcome the construction fears above almost all others. The outcome in which the people whose good opinion the construction depends on for its supply and its social functioning have access to an account of who the narcissist actually is, offered by someone whose love for the narcissist makes the account undeniable, not the bitter account of someone who is clearly motivated by hurt to exaggerate the harm. The clear, specific, accurate account of someone who loved what was real in the narcissist and was still harmed by what was real in the narcissist and is now simply telling the truth about what happened. That account, in the social world the narcissist inhabits, is the most credible and the most threatening form the knowledge can take, and the monitoring compulsion is the fear's attempt to keep track of whether and how that account is circulating. The second form the fear takes is the specific behavioral pattern that most people who have been hurt by a narcissist and then observe the narcissist's subsequent behavior recognize without being able to fully name. It is the performance of having been the one who was hurt. The specific, often public, sometimes dramatic presentation of the narcissist as the wrong party in the relationship that ended, as the person who was misunderstood, who was treated unfairly, who gave more than was received, who tried harder than was acknowledged, who is now carrying the weight of an ending that was not of their making and not their fault. This performance is not simply the ordinary narcissistic self-protection that any difficult ending produces. It is specifically calibrated to the knowledge that the person who truly loved them carries. It is the preemptive counter-narrative, the version of events that the narcissist deploys in the social world before the accurate account can establish itself, that is specifically designed to make the accurate account, when it arrives, seem like the biased perspective of someone who is motivated by hurt to present a one-sided view of a complicated situation that had wrongdoing on both sides. The performance is the fear's most visible expression, and its visibility is precisely calibrated to the specific quality of the threat the fear is organized around, to the specific, accurate, credible knowledge that the person who truly loved them is now carrying, and that the performance is specifically designed to neutralize before it reaches the social world in the form the narcissist most fears. And the third form the fear takes, and the specific thing the narcissist does in the private moments when the construction's conversions are insufficient, to keep the fear entirely below the surface. And what this reveals about the specific interior love and is the most honest and the most rarely discussed thing available in the entire psychology. Where we are going next. The third form the fear takes is the one that arrives in the private moments. The moments when the supply-seeking forward motion has temporarily quieted, when the new relationship's enthusiasm has not yet activated for the evening or has already subsided, when the monitoring compulsion has not found anything new to process, and the performance of having been wronged has already been delivered to the available audience, and there is nothing left to do with the construction except be inside the silence that the construction was specifically built to prevent. These moments exist for every narcissist. They exist with a frequency and a persistence that the visible outward, performance-oriented surface of narcissistic behavior consistently conceals. And in these moments, in the specific quality of silence that the construction cannot entirely fill, the third form of the fear arrives. It is not named as fear even internally. It is not experienced with the conscious recognition that would allow it to be examined and understood and potentially addressed in the way that conscious fears can be addressed. It arrives as something that the narcissist experiences as a quality of the silence itself, a specific sourceless, directionless discomfort that is different from ordinary restlessness in its specificity without being specific enough to be traced to its actual source. Because tracing it to its actual source would require looking in a direction that the construction has spent the narcissist's entire adult life preventing any sustained looking. The direction of the actual self, the direction of the wound, the direction of the specific knowledge that the person who truly loved them is now carrying, that they received something real and genuine and specifically personally offered, and that they used it carelessly, harmfully, without the care that real love deserves, and that some part of them, buried underneath the construction and the conversions, and the performance of having been the one who was wrong, knows it deserved. What the third form of the fear actually is, described as precisely as the psychology allows, is the specific, unresolvable discomfort of the narcissist's actual self being in the presence of its own knowledge of what it did, not the construction's knowledge. The construction has a version of events that is organized, defensible, internally consistent, capable of being delivered to an audience with conviction. The actual self's knowledge. The knowledge that lives below the construction, in the place that the real love reached in the windows when the construction stepped back, and that carries an account of what happened in those windows that is completely different from the construction's account. The actual self was there. The actual self received the real love and knew it was real and was reached by it in ways that the construction's subsequent narrative cannot entirely overwrite, because the actual self's experience of being genuinely known and genuinely loved is not the kind of experience that retrospective devaluation can make into nothing. The actual self knows what was received. It also knows what was done with what was received, and the gap between those two things, between what was offered and what was done with the offering, is the specific content of the third form of the fear. Not guilt in the full, conscious, morally organized sense that a person with full access to their own interior life would experience it. Something more primitive and more foundational than that. The raw, unprocessed construction, bypassing awareness that something genuinely valuable was in the narcissist's hands, and is no longer in the narcissist's hands, and is no longer in the narcissist's hands specifically, because of what the narcissist did with it while it was there. And the awareness of that, arriving not as a consciously held thought, but as a quality of the silence in the private moments, is the most honest and the most specifically distressing thing the narcissist's actual self produces in the act of hurting someone who truly loved them. Now let's talk about what all three of these forms of the fear mean for the person who did the loving and received the hurting and is now, in whatever stage of the aftermath they are currently in, trying to understand what is happening in the narcissist's psychology and what it means for what they should do with that understanding. Because understanding the fear is not an end in itself. It is useful only insofar as it provides something that actually changes the experience of being in the aftermath of this specific kind of harm. And what it provides, if it is received fully and honestly rather than selectively, is something considerably more complex than the simple satisfaction that most people hope to find when they discover that the narcissist is not entirely unaffected by what they did. The monitoring compulsion is real. The performance of having been wronged is real. The private discomfort in the silence is real. All three of these are genuine interior, not performed aspects of the narcissist's experience in the aftermath of hurting someone who truly loved them. And they are not evidence of the change that would make the relationship safe to return to, not evidence of the reckoning that would make the apology, if it arrives, an actual accounting for what happened, not evidence of the growth that would make a different outcome possible if the relationship were given another opportunity to be what it never quite managed to be. They are evidence of something much more limited than any of those things. They are evidence of the impact. An impact, as we have established in other conversations in this space, is not the same as change. It is not the same as readiness. It is not the same as the specific, sustained, behaviorally demonstrated development that genuine change in a narcissist's psychology requires, when it occurs at all. And that takes years of professionally supported work of a kind that the monitoring compulsion and the performance and the private discomfort do not indicate are being undertaken. They indicate the impact. The impact is real. The impact is significant. The impact is more than the cynical narrative of complete indifference accounts for. And the impact is insufficient evidence for anything that would require the change it does not indicate. What the person who was hurt and who truly loved them does with this understanding is the most important question the understanding produces, and it deserves the most honest answer available. The understanding that the narcissist fears the knowledge you carry is not an instruction to carry it publicly. The knowledge you carry is not primarily for deployment in the social world, not primarily for the purpose of correcting the narrative the narcissist is performing, not primarily for the construction's disruption, however warranted the disruption might be. The knowledge you carry is yours. It is the specific, accurate, loving, and therefore complete account of a relationship that you lived through in full, with your full perception and your full caring and your full investment in something that was real on your side. And what the knowledge is for, at its most honest and most useful, is your own clarity. The clarity of someone who knows what happened without needing anyone else to confirm it. Who knows what was real on their side without needing the narcissist's acknowledgement to make the reality official. Who knows what the relationship cost without needing the narcissist's agreement about the cost to justify the decision that the cost eventually made necessary. This clarity is not the clarity of someone who has made the narcissist the villain of a story organized around the narcissist. It is the clarity of someone who has made themselves the subject of their own story, who has organized the account of what happened around their own experience of it, their own genuine love within it, their own healing in the aftermath of it, and who holds the narcissist's fear of that clarity not as a victory, but simply as the accurate confirmation that the clarity is real, that the knowledge is genuine, that what was felt was not mistaken, and what was harmed was not nothing, and what is being rebuilt in the aftermath is not a consolation prize but the actual, specific, completely personal life that was always waiting on the other side of the relationship that was never going to be able to contain it. And here is what the narcissist's fear ultimately reveals about the relationship that most people who have been in this specific situation need to hear clearly and need to hear in a way that does not simultaneously minimize what happened, overstate the narcissist's capacity for the kind of interiority that the fear might suggest. The fear reveals that the relationship was not the same from both sides, but was not nothing from either side. On your side it was real love, genuinely felt, specifically personal, organized around the actual person rather than the construction's performance. On the narcissist's side it was something less organized and less conscious and less specifically personal but not entirely absent. It was the closest thing to being genuinely known that the actual self has experienced, the closest thing to the real receiving of something that was offered without conditions, the closest thing to the specific quality of connection that the wound underneath the construction has been reaching for in every relationship without the construction's defenses ever quite allowing the reaching to complete itself. The fear in the aftermath is the actual self's registration of what it had and what it lost and what it was responsible for losing, not the construction's registration, the actual self's. And the actual self's registration, however buried, however defended, however thoroughly the construction's conversions have been deployed to prevent it from being consciously experienced as what it actually is. That registration is the most genuinely human thing available in the narcissist's aftermath. And you, who loved what was real in them, who saw the actual self in the windows and cared about it accurately, and were harmed by the construction's ultimate reassertion. You are the only person whose knowledge of the relationship makes the actual self's registration possible. Your love was the occasion for the most genuine interior experience the narcissist's actual self has had access to. Your being hurt by the construction's response to that love is the occasion for the most genuine fear the actual self's psychology produces. None of that makes the harm acceptable. None of it makes returning safe. None of it is grounds for anything other than the clearest, most grounded, most specifically self-referencing healing that your knowledge of what happened makes available to you. But it is the truth, the complete truth. And you who love truly deserve the complete truth rather than either of the simplified versions that are easier to hold. You deserve to know what your love actually was. And what your love actually was, seen clearly in full with the understanding that the narcissist's fear provides as its final confirmation, was exactly what it felt like it was. Real, specific, worth the loving even in the harm, and worth the healing that the loving's honesty now makes possible.